So I'm here inside the studios on Norrington Road, Leyton. And I walk past here a lot. I'm always fascinated by what's inside. So I'm going to have a chat with a brilliant artist called Jessica Voorsanger, and she's going to show me around her studio and talk to me about her work.
My name is Jessica Voorsanger and I'm an artist. I'm originally from New York but moved to London in 1990, so I've been here for quite a lot of my adult life. And I explore the themes surrounding popular culture. Having grown up in New York, I saw celebrities on the street all the time and it was very exciting. But I was very, very shy. And so my relationship to seeing them was almost like it was a visit to a virtual world, because I was never going to interact with them. The other reason that popular culture has been such an inspiration for me is that as a kid, my mom and dad split up when I was a baby, and my mom was out working most of the time. And my sister was a really prolific reader. She just would read through, she read Gone with the Wind in 4 days. And everybody praised her. "Oh, aren't you wonderful, Kate? You're such a good reader." But I couldn't read because that was Kate's thing. So I knew how to read, but reading was her thing. So I watched TV. And then I memorized the TV guide. I knew when everything was on. I knew whatever was any time, any channel you could ask me. I played games with the television where I could get very close to it to see how far I could, and far away to see basically how far I could hear it at the lowest level. I just played all these interactive games with the TV because it was sort of my babysitter. And instead of that being a tragic thing, it inspired a whole sort of lifetime of artwork. And for a long time, the work that I made was about celebrity, because I really believed I wanted to meet and interact with these celebrities. And what I realized was that I wasn't actually interested in celebrity. I was interested in the characters they portrayed. And it took a really long time to realize that. So I'd done all kinds of work. I trained as a painter, went to the Rhode Island School of Design, and then from that I went to Goldsmiths, did my MA in fine art, and explored performance. I sort of branched out from painting into performance and installation, photography, sculpture. Basically, the difference between American and British art education is that in America you work super, super hard and you work by project, and then that directs you towards understanding what you want to make and do. And in Britain, it's all conceptual around the ideas, and that's what leads you into deciding what it is you want to do within the media you're exploring. And so it sort of stopped being important that I was a painter, and it became important that I was able to express the ideas I wanted to in whatever way was most appropriate. And so that's why I've done quite a lot of performance and interactive work. I'm no longer as shy as I used to be. And a lot of what I've done is incredibly varied. I've done huge installations of mail art projects where I've written to people to see what kind of responses I got back, and then those the responses would be displayed within an exhibition space with all of the elements of the responses that I received, from the envelopes to the messages to the pre-printed cards to everything. For a long time I didn't paint, actually. I took about 15 years out and I stopped painting. And then when I had a space I could paint, I didn't really know what I wanted to paint. And this is something that I sort of have encountered a few times, and all artists do, where you sort of get to the end of a run of a series of works and then you're not really sure where that's going to lead you. And then you have to reinvent yourself and re-question the things you're interested in and see what's relevant and valid. And playing is really important. You need to just sort of experiment and play and make a lot of bad work to then figure out what it is you want to do. We used to have a great studio in East London, and then the building was sold. And so that's when I stopped making all of the sculptural projects. And I did a huge concrete installation piece, which was 120 concrete panels where I got artists, critics, curators, all to make impressions of their hands in concrete, like Grauman's Chinese Theater. And then I placed them on the floor of a gallery in Viner Street. And having the kind of studio that I needed to be able to mix concrete and, you know, prepare it for the artists and the participants to use was amazing. But when I lost that space and I was working from home, I had to reassess the kinds of works I made, which is how the mail art projects evolved, because they took no space. All I needed was to be able to type a letter and send them out and get some cards and things for people to send back to me. And then they also, amazingly, they would pack up to being very small, but when you installed them on clothesline or ribbon or however they ended up being displayed, could take up a massive space. So it was fantastic. So it was this sort of best of both worlds. And so I worked within that realm for quite a while until we had the loft done in the house, and then all of a sudden I had a room at home that could be my studio. And that was the first time I started painting again after about 15 years. And I thought, oh, I really want to do some painting. But I don't know what I want to do. And so I started painting portraits, because I've always really liked to paint portraits. And portraits of, in my undergrad, it was very figurative, the work that I made in my undergrad. And so I started painting portraits, and I actually started making portraits of Woody Allen. And I don't know why, I just did one of Woody Allen, and I liked it so much, I decided to do more. And then I ended up making 13 portraits of Woody Allen of different stages in his life. And at the same time as that, I had a show that was coming up in Berlin, and I had a show that was coming up in at the New Art Gallery Walsall at the same time. And what I'd planned to do for the New Art Gallery Walsall was create a huge karaoke sort of theater lounge where there was a stage and all of these interactive lights. And the idea was I wanted people to be able to inhabit their heroes, and I had to pre-select a whole bunch of heroes for them to become. But what I was exploring at that point was how reality TV destroyed my idea of what celebrity was. And celebrity, for me, was something very special. It was something that somebody had attained because they actually had a skill in something. They could sing, they could dance, they could play a sport, they were great actors or actresses. And they were able to inhabit this magical space that normal people couldn't. And that's what celebrity was for me. And all of a sudden with reality TV, everybody became a celebrity. And that was, you know, obviously Andy Warhol's 15 Minutes of Fame, but these people became celebrities for being, it was more about notoriety, and it was more about being quite extreme in their behavior that created their celebrity, as opposed to them being actually worthy of celebrity in my mind for having, you know. And so I had this crisis because I'd been making work about celebrity for so many years and about the relationship between fans and celebrities, which was the thing I had focused on, that I had to reassess what I thought about it. And I decided that that celebrity had become interchangeable, and that one reality TV star was completely interchangeable for another one, and the way that I decided to explore that was in this installation at the New Art Gallery Walsall that had a huge stage, it had a disco ball, it had interactive lights, it had a karaoke system, and I selected 15 different celebrities, all pop stars, who I thought deserved to be, you know, famous and celebrities. So I chose people I valued. But the idea was that they then became interchangeable. So I painted portraits of each of them, and then I created a costume for each of them. And the idea was that when you were interacting with this artwork, you could put on the costume and then get on the stage and perform karaoke as that person. But what I wanted to get people to think about was that because of reality TV, that you could get dressed up as Madonna, although actually you couldn't get dressed up as Madonna because I didn't do her. You could get dressed up as Michael Jackson from the Thriller phase, but sing Elvis. Or you could dress up as Elvis but sing Black Eyed Peas. So I made a video that went with it, which was shown on the back of the stage, which was not broadcast, it was projected, so that when people weren't interacting, there was always something going on. And then when they were interacting, then the sound from the film would go down and then they would sing themselves. And the music, there was a song attributed to each of those people because they were all performers. So it was, Kurt Cobain and Billy Idol and, a huge array of sort of quirky folk. And but obviously the costumes were all different sizes. So somebody might really want to be Cher, but would only fit into the Elvis costume. So you had this mix of performing that happened anyway, because people chose the outfit they wanted to wear, and then they chose the song they wanted to sing, and it just happened organically. And that was amazing for me. So at the same time, I was preparing for my show in Berlin, and I was painting these paintings of Woody Allen, and I thought, oh, well, I should be doing the same thing for Woody Allen. So I created this film. All of these films are available on YouTube, by the way. I created this film of myself performing as Woody Allen. So I did a series of his early stand-up, which was amazing. So let's not talk about Woody Allen as an individual. He made his own life choices. But as a performer and as a writer, I mean, he's just a genius. So those early stand-up are hilarious, and I thought they were brilliant. And so I performed as him doing those routines. And because I filmed them all in this small space I had in my home, the lighting changed, which added to the film so interestingly. And so when I went in and out of focus because I was moving because of the light, I really looked like him, but then I sounded like me, even though I put on a little bit more of a New York accent. And then I edited that together with a laughing track, and that was shown in the space with these portraits of Woody Allen. But then I also transcribed all of these stand-up routines that I had done, so I could use them, but also for the exhibition. So I had all of that available with the 3 different costumes of Woody Allen that I had made. So there was an early-ish one, Annie Hall, a middle-aged one, and an older Woody. And then, I had wigs and all of that stuff available, just like in the other exhibitions that were similar, that you had all the accessories, you had the costumes, and then you could then do a stand-up routine as Woody Allen if you wanted. But the interesting thing for me, and this is something I really actually like to explore. It doesn't always happen within the work, but I do like to explore what is potentially quite a serious subject, but I use humor. And so within the Woody Allen piece, the connection of both of us being from New York and both of us being Jewish, and New York and Berlin, because it was shown in Berlin, were in a way cities that had gone through similar kinds of experience, where they were both high and then low. They both nearly become bankrupt. Then they were both phoenixes that came out of the ashes. But in Berlin, the space that I was showing in was in the Jewish quarter. So Woody Allen and myself both being Jewish in this space on this street that had lots of brass plaques of the people that had lived in these buildings and were taken away during the Holocaust was quite powerful. And that the memorial for the neighborhood was on the corner of that street. It was right next to the Jewish high school where there was an armed guard and CCTV. So there was a sort of heaviness around the area anyway. And then you went in, and then there were all of these jokes that were making fun of the fact that, often referring to Judaism in a light way, that people, when they came to the exhibition, weren't sure if they were allowed to laugh. And that for me was amazing. And it made them think. So I like making people think. I've been in here for 4 years, about 4 years now. And it's originally it was a sublet. I took over half of the space and I share it with someone else. And he's a lovely guy, but to be honest, he's been so busy and his life has gone in so many different directions that I'm never here with him. So I've been able to make this studio feel like my own, although my half is quite small. The reason I took the space on is I had cancer in 2012. And after the treatments, I was very weak and I wasn't able to do very much at all. And part of my thinking about taking the studio, because it was just down the street from where I live, was it'll get me out of the house. And even if I only go there for half an hour, or I only go there and just sit down and don't do anything, there's something about that mental space of leaving, walking, and then being in a place that's just yours that is really important. But I had no idea what I wanted to paint. So I started exploring a bunch of different themes. I thought, okay, well, you know, I love Star Trek. Let me paint some Star Trek paintings. Let me try doing a series of, oh, okay, I'll do a series of paintings about science fiction. Okay, let's do a Battlestar Galactica one. And they all, but, you know, where I might have liked the way one or two of them were resolved, they weren't really going anywhere for me yet. But meanwhile, I'd been doing these works on paper, these collages, which were very involved. And they all used an image as a trigger, and then I reacted to that. So most of the images were from the starting point of the particular series I'm referring to, came from a series, it came from a book about London, a Batsford book from the 50s, and the color quality and the texture of the paper I really loved. And they were these views of London. And what was gorgeous about them is that most of them didn't have people, but they inhabited this urban space. But then the urban space was kind of dreamy and beautiful because of the way that the color was tinted, the pages had been tinted before they were printed. And so I started collaging people into them. So I cut out celebrities from magazines, newspapers, you know, whatever was relevant. And my criteria for cutting them out really genuinely was I had to know who they were when I cut them out, and it was okay if I forgot who they were afterward. And then I started collaging those into these images, and then I drew into them. And so I would react to things like the curve, you know, of a twirl of hair would create a line that would go off somewhere else, and then I might paint into them. But it was really seeing how one thing against another, it was really about contrast, would make something else pop. And for the first time, in being so obsessively, or thinking, I was obsessively thinking about celebrity and the relationship of fans and to celebrities and popular culture generally, for the first time, it didn't matter who they were. It just mattered what it looked like. And that was really liberating. And I thought, all right, well, how do I translate those collages into paintings? So I started out with this one, which was the first of that series. And basically I translated the image that I was reacting to into patterned fabrics. So I would sew patterned fabrics together, and then that was a way that I could collage, but in a 3D scale or a larger kind of scale and a larger kind of, or something with more substance. And then I decided I would draw into them and paint into them, and what I really wanted to do was collage images into them, but I didn't think I could because of the relationship of paper to paint. I thought would be archivally awkward, so I didn't put cut out images in, I was painting them. So some of them worked really well and others didn't. And then eventually I just thought, you know what, sod it, and I stuck some collaged images in, and then they started doing the popping that I really wanted. And so that particular painting started out being referencing Quantum Leap, the TV show, and then it turned into a Doctor Who painting because of the things I collaged into it. But I sort of merged the painting in with the collaging, and then also started dripping and pouring and seeing how that kind of mark with these patterned fabrics became very exciting. So in time that evolved into becoming something that was much more of a system, that was much more, well, it's a body of work I'm actually very excited about that I've been working on now for a couple of years, but I never would have gotten there if I hadn't come to this space and I hadn't started playing. And, you know, you have to make a bunch of things that really are terrible before you get to the stuff that is nice. Okay, so this is the one I was talking about. This was the first one in the series. So I'd collaged these vintage fabrics. Well, I sewed them together, rather, sorry. And then I started painting in, so I put some text, I put in Quantum Leap, I put in characters. Here's the big Scott Bakula character, which he's no longer there anymore. And, but it just wasn't working, and I kept trying to make things work, so I started drawing into them the way I did in the as I would on the works on paper. Some of it worked, some of it didn't work. And what I really wanted was to have something really pop. And it was when I put the Billie Piper image, and then I turned it into a Doctor Who meets Quantum Leap painting, where it started to work. And I've then refined it. This was one of the early ones where I just kept it as what it was, which was a painting about the odd couple. So I did the portraits, I did the collaging, but where it works, it doesn't really go anywhere terribly far for me. So and I've done a lot of projects with Star Trek, mainly original series, but other series as well. And so these two paintings are quite large. They're the same scale, but they give you a much better idea of the kind of things I'm doing with the paint, where I'm playing with the images, so I'm playing with the drip lines. Most of the paint comes in after I've stretched the fabrics, and then I start adding in the collaging. But in some cases, I'll go back and paint into them some more. I'm using drips as ways of framing different faces. I'll use a drip as a way of separating. So in this case, Uhura's face has been cut to just have that little bit of blue seep through. So they become very aesthetic. And that one is this one up here is my really Star Trek specific. I mean, these are Star Trek specific as well, but these are the only ones I've actually done the cross stitches on myself. So even though that's Next Generation's logo, we've got Spock up there, and the colors in this one are really pertinent because those are the three uniform colors: the golden yellow, the blue, and the red. And so then that became a bit more connected to Star Trek, as well as these fabrics, which felt very Star Trek and Klingon to me. This fabric is what was left over from the making of a costume of a Klingon that I had used in another installation. A lot of people don't realize that Henry Moore, myself, I didn't actually die. I just moved to America and changed my accent. What I realized was actually that what I really wished was that I could meet those characters. And so I did the best I could by creating an installation where I had a huge camera, as if it was in a TV studio, massive thing that a friend of mine built for me. We talked about the specs and he created it. And it was wooden and fake, but it looked like, a TV camera from the 1960s, massive with a big base. But inside was hollow, and inside was a little camera that was being used as a link to a monitor on the floor. So when you were facing this camera, you could see yourself in the monitor on the floor. And I created a whole sci-fi installation, fake landscape, sci-fi landscape. Basically, when you entered the space, it was as if you were entering a television studio where they were filming Star Trek. But the exciting thing about this installation was that you could see yourself on TV and you actually could be on Star Trek. And a friend of mine who I've collaborated with quite a lot in the past, Mwape Nsofu, he will make the costumes that I need. So he created all of the costumes for the original series staff. And then, like the other interactive pieces, the visitors to the exhibition were invited to put on any costume of whichever character they wanted to from Star Trek, and then interact in this fake science fiction landscape to then see themselves on Star Trek. For the people that were a little bit uncomfortable and didn't want to just get out there and throw tribbles at each other, I had transcribed 4 different Star Trek episodes for them to read if they wanted to. But that was the start of the tribbles. So I made a bunch of tribbles for that. And those of you who know the Trouble with Tribbles episode from Star Trek original series, basically it's the one thing that if people haven't watched Star Trek, they do know about this episode, which is super iconic. But in the scene where tribbles are a small animal without a face, hands or legs, it's just a ball of fur. But it's absolutely benign, super lovely, very happy, and it gives off a mood enhancer that makes you feel happy. But of course they hate Klingons, who at the time were the enemies of the Enterprise and the Federation. Now, obviously, Klingons had come integrated, they're wonderful, but at the time, you know, they were the troublesome alien race, and the Tribbles didn't like Klingons. And in this one moment, Captain Kirk opens up the overhead compartment and is showered with tribbles. According to Mr. Spock, they were over 1 million. He gives you the exact number. I can't remember how many. But there's this beautiful image of Captain Kirk with tribbles up to his neck. So I started to make a few tribbles just as a Star Trek prop, which then led me to creating a Trouble with Tribbles experience, which was at the Art Car Boot Fair, where I invited you to put on one of the costumes so you could become either a Klingon, which was some of that fabric, or you could be Captain Kirk, or you could be Mr. Spock. And you would sit in this chair, and there you sat in front of a backdrop, which was a Star Trek-y sort of fabric. And then my son was on a ladder with a bucket of tribbles. And then when I said, okay, Fergal would he would hold the bucket, but he'd drop all the tribbles on top of your head. And then in that moment, I would take a burst of photographs of you having the tribbles fall on your head. And then I sold you the picture from the burst you liked the best. And that was the Trouble with Tribbles experience. I was also selling some tribbles. But again, one thing really leads into another. And so I would say that's true of all my projects, is that one thing has led into another, and they're so interconnected, even though they're all utterly different. But it was that Trouble with Tribbles experience that led me to making loads more tribbles, and then having that as part of my museums at night event in Scunthorpe. So hold that thought. I'm going to go get you some tribbles. Tribbles! So imagine, and that's not anywhere near 1 million.